So, I have made references to League of Legends in my How to Holocure video series, a series where I talk about the features in the game Holocure. This is mostly in reference to League of Legends' absurdly large character roster, which is why it will probably be a surprise to learn that I have never actually played League of Legends. What I have played, however, was the League of Legends card game, Legends of Runeterra, a game that is just as unbalanced as League of Legends, only with 1/10 of the toxicity since you don't have teammates in CCGs, and so have no one else to blame for your own ineptitude. When I played Legends of Runeterra, I spent most of my time being a zombie Ionia player, which was mostly played by trying to keep yourself alive until you cap your mana, and then you'd summon a horde of Anivias to swamp the opponents in snow and ice, a control deck with some combo aspects. With the release of Rising Tides, however, there was one champion who had the potential of being the perfect card for me to play, Lee Sin. In Legends of Runeterra, Lee Sin has the ability where if you play a spell, he gains the ability to challenge a card during an attack, which basically means he can choose which enemy minion to attack, and with a second spell, he gains Barrier, which makes him immune to one attack. When he levels up after playing 8 spells, he gains a special ability. When Lee Sin challenges an enemy during his attack, he will cast a skill that allows him to strike both the enemy minion and the enemy nexus before the attack begins, bouncing the enemy minion back into the enemy player's hand if he didn't kill them. So how was Lee Sin meant to be played? Well, he was meant to be played in a combo deck. You would use his supporting cards to help keep you alive while you played spells to fulfill his level up condition, and once you reached that point, you'd attack with Lee Sin to kill your enemy in a single turn. How? Well, in Legends of Runeterra, players can block attackers with blockers, but if a blocker is removed from combat before the actual attack begins, then they leave behind a phantom blocker that prevents the enemy attacker from actually attacking. It's basically a blocker with 0 attack and 0 health. However, there was one exception to this case. An attacker with the keyword Overwhelm could bypass a phantom blocker and directly attack the enemy nexus. So, a leveled up Lee Sin would leave behind a phantom blocker before each attack, meaning if you somehow managed to give him Overwhelm, then he would be able to essentially strike the nexus twice. While this was a brilliant strategy in theory, this brilliant strategy had way too many flaws. The first obvious flaw was that Lee Sin was an incredibly expensive champion at 6 mana. But there was another major flaw, and that was giving Lee Sin access to the Overwhelm keyword. See, Legends of Runeterra separates all of its cards into regions based on the regions of the world of Runeterra, and a player is meant to build a deck using only 2 of the regions, with each region having a different playstyle to reflect the culture and identity of said region. Noxus is the aggro region, Freljord is the big meatball region, Shadow Isles is the death region, and Ionia is the jackass region. Lee Sin is an Ionia champion, meaning he is meant to be played with Ionia cards. However, Ionia does not have access to the Overwhelm keyword. That keyword only existed in the Freljord and the Noxus region, and neither of those regions complemented the deck archetype that Lee Sin decks were going for. That all changed, however, with one faithful patch. Patch 1.10 was the very first patch of the new expansion, which introduced a new region, Targon. Targon's identity was always somewhat nebulous compared to the other regions before it, since it had so much going on. Daybreak, Nightfall, Celestial, Support, but if I had to boil Targon down to one particular archetype, I would boil down Targon to Going Tall. Targon is the region with strong singular buffs and powerful unit protection. It had access to buff cards like Zenith Blade and Pale's Cascade, powerful healing cards like Star Shaping and Guiding Touch, and access to a new keyword, Spell Shield, a keyword that made units immune to a singular spell. It was the perfect region to complement the Lee Sin OTK deck, and for the cherry on top, Lee Sin received a massive buff, reducing his mana cost to 4 mana. This began the era of Lee Sin decks. The Lee Sin deck was somewhat flexible, but did have a few key components. The first of those was Lee Sin, obviously, as the finisher. Then you would have Eye of the Dragon, a 2-cost unit with the ability to create an ephemeral dragon with lifesteal after you played 2 spells. She would be your main defense in the early game, serving to keep you alive until your Lee Sin was ready. You'd have a handful of cheap units to stabilize your curve, and then the rest of your deck would be devoted to all the best spells from both Ionia and Targon. Zenith Blade to provide Lee Sin with the Overwhelm keyword needed to pull off the OTK, Bastion to provide him with Spell Shield, Deny and Will of Ionia to ruin your opponent's day, and every other decent and cheap spell. Needless to say, the deck was incredibly powerful and people hated it. I think it's just that people seem to hate OTK decks, but I wouldn't know, I was a zombie Anivia player at the time. However, the deck had one major flaw. If you lost your Lee Sin or all of your Zenith Blades, you were screwed. The deck had no way of winning if its main game plan was countered, and there was no easy option for an alternative win condition. People considered slotting in the champion Zed, who was a 3-cost card who generated another minion with his stats to attack with him every time he attacked, but that also wasn't a good option. See, in Legends of Runeterra, you can only play one champion on the board at a time, and if you have a duplicate champion in your hand, it transforms into what is called a champion spell, and Zed's champion spell sucked. Now, this might not seem like a big deal, but any CCG player can tell you how terrible it is to play when one of your cards in your hand is absolutely useless. Still, even with this flaw, Lee Sin decks still dominated, and eventually Lee Sin was nerfed to 5 mana in patch 1.13. And then patch 1.15 introduced Zoe. So to describe Zoe, she's a 1 mana 1/1 with the elusive keyword, a very annoying keyword that basically prevents her from being blocked by blockers, and when she hits the enemy Nexus, she generates a spell that allows you to place a low-cost celestial card in your hand. When Zoe leveled up, she made it so that your units would share keywords and would create a card that allowed you to place any celestial card in your hand. She was basically the perfect champion for Lee Sin decks. She provided early game pressure on the enemy while generating spells that could then be used to create celestial cards to help stabilize your early game, and in the event that you lost your Lee Sin, Zoe could be used as an alternate win condition, as her level up not only provided a busted effect, but she also generated large celestial finishers on her level up. Basically, the nerf to Lee Sin became worthless with her introduction, and Lee Sin decks continued to plague the latter. So why did Lee Sin decks stop being played? Well, besides getting rotated when rotation was introduced in patch 4.3.0, the game just got faster. Aggro decks kept being able to end turns earlier and earlier with each new set of cards introduced, and while there was never any early game bullshit in the likes of other card games like Yu-Gi-Oh!, it was fast enough that Lee Sin decks just couldn't keep up and eventually fell out of favor. I don't really remember the exact patch when Lee Sin decks fell off in the meta. I think it was around the time the new regional Shurima was introduced, but that was also a time many players would consider to be one of the worst eras of Legends of Runeterra, the era of the Unholy Trinity. But that's a story for another time. So, thanks for watching this dumb video of mine. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for future videos, and I'll see you next time.